So what if we did the old switcheroony and went edge rusher in free agency? What's up, everybody? This is GreenBean, and welcome back to another video. That's right, we're going to talk about flipping our mindset and maybe going about this whole offseason thing a little bit different way, maybe even the exact opposite way. We've talked numerous times about fixing the offensive line and maybe wide receiver or some of the defensive backs like safety and cornerback in free agency. So it'll do what? It'll give us a little bit more flexibility and maneuverability in the draft, and you won't have to draft for need. But an interesting thing is taking place that I think a lot of Jets fans are aware of, but we have to take that and make it into something here. So as we know, the New York Jets are the 4th overall pick. So that means not 1, not 2, not 3. And it just so happens that our number 1 need really this year, it looks like it just might be edge. And it just so happens that edge is really strong at the top of this class. But it looks like there's a very realistic possibility that the teams picking before us could grab the edge rushers that are worthy of being taken with a top 5 pick in this draft. So you look at teams like the Detroit Lions. It seems like Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan is all but a shoo-in. Unless they go quarterback or something like that with the 2nd overall pick, it looks like a pretty good bet that the Detroit Lions are going to want to keep that homegrown Michigan guy in Detroit and take him with their pick. And then you have the Jaguars and the Texans. They could make mistakes and they can do silly things. They've both done it before, but it looks like a pretty good bet that Kayvon Thibodeau will not make it through those 3 teams. So that leaves us with really the next crop. A lot of people put Karlaftis in that group. And, you might want to take him. They put guys like Jermaine Johnson and even Drake Jackson or Ojabo. Some of these other guys, you could justify taking that high, but more than likely, we're going to be just outside of where the 2 premium edge rushers are, and therefore you might need to go a different route and take another position. So if we include that thinking into how we go about free agency, that it's not likely we're going to get one of the 2 edge rushers that we would want if they fell to us at 4, why don't we see about going in to free agency and taking care of that position? This way, you can have some flexibility about maybe taking another position, maybe a cornerback, maybe that safety that everybody likes to talk about. Maybe we can do that. Or maybe you feel a little bit better about grabbing one of the offensive linemen that high or a wide receiver or what have you. Maybe. So who would be available if we were going to go into free agency and not like bargain bin shop? What if we were going to go into free agency with the specific purpose of getting our edge rusher in a similar fashion that we went into free agency last year and grabbed Carl Lawson? As we know, he got an Achilles injury and we got to see him, how many? 0 snaps for us. So maybe we go in free agency again and we get him a partner. And this way, our 2 edge positions are manned by vets who've been in the NFL and you feel confident about. So maybe changing it from grabbing a Dante Fowler or one of those guys for, $6-7 million. And let's go into free agency and grab one of the premier edge rusher guys. So who's available? Who's up there at the top? And we haven't been talking about these guys because we don't think the Jets are going to do this. But what if they do? Who's up there? Well, number 1 has got to be Von Miller. Now, we know Von Miller, he's not exactly a young chippy, but he's still performing. So he's an 11-year vet. He's 6'3", 250 pounds. He's 32 years old, but he had 9.5 sacks last year. At 32 years old, 9.5 sacks. He also had 19 tackles for a loss and 1 forced fumble. That's pretty insane because it shows you that he's not specifically and only a pass rusher. He can play 3 downs and be effective in the run game as well. In his career, he has 115 sacks, 26 forced fumbles, and 124 tackles for a loss. The guy's been the model of consistency throughout his career. We know He was traded midseason to the Rams, and he just recently won a Super Bowl ring. So he's got his second ring. He's got lots of money. He's got a great career. Maybe the Jets go and say, hey, listen, finish your career with us. We'll give you a 2 or 3 year contract, and you come and be our edge rusher. 9.5 sacks, 19 tackles for a loss, 1 forced fumble. We could use that. So maybe we look that way and go for the big fish. Maybe Joe Douglas does that. He's looking like he's going to command anywhere around a $15 million a year contract. So you got to make that decision. Next on the list is somebody that gets brought up to me often. Guy by the name of Chandler Jones. Now, Chandler Jones, he's 31 years old, so just a touch younger than Von Miller, but he's still in that same age bracket. So he's 6'5", 265 pounds. He's a 10-year vet, and his career, he's had 107.5 sacks, 118 tackles for a loss, and 33 forced fumbles. Last year, he still had 10.5 sacks, 12 tackles for a loss, and 6 forced fumbles. That's interesting. 6 forced fumbles. Now, I want to make sure that you know something about Chandler Jones. Chandler Jones didn't just have 10.5 sacks. So that can sound pretty good. But he had 5 in one game. That opening day game, he came out and had 5 sacks. So the rest of the season, all 16 games, he's had 5.5 sacks. So that's just something to consider. He's clearly an impact player. He's had a very, very strong career. But you got to know that about him, but he could be somebody that the Jets want to bring in, known as a high caliber team guy, all that stuff, real motivating, can be a leader on the team. He's going to command anywhere from 14 to 16 million as well. So both of the two guys that we just mentioned, they're going to be expensive. They're going to be near the top of what you're going to want to pay an edge rusher. So the next guy is another name that has been linked to the Jets for a few years. I don't think there's ever been any real interest, and that's Jadeveon Clowney. He is 6'5", 255. He's 29 years old, so he's 2 years younger than Von Miller. Again, he's still going to be around 30 years old next season. He's an 8-year vet, and his career, he's had 41 sacks, 86 tackles for a loss, and 12 forced fumbles in his career. In 2021, though, he matched his best season ever. Don't forget, even though he was the #1 overall draft pick one year with just so many expectations, he's only had 9 sacks as his best season. I think it was 9.5, actually. 9.5 sacks was his best season. He has never eclipsed double digits, never got to that 10. He's a half sack away from having a 10-sack season, but he still does a lot for the running game. In addition to his pass rush skills. He also has a bunch of quarterback hits and pressures and all that sort of stuff. Well, last year he did have 9 sacks, 11 tackles for a loss, and 2 forced fumbles. Now, I want to tell you, he's also been on 3 different teams the last 3 years. So each one of the last 3 years, he was on a different team. What does that tell you about the guy? Nobody really feels the need to commit to him, and he's still asking for big contracts too. It's said that he's probably going to command anywhere from $12 to $14 million, so a little bit less than the first 2 guys, but still not cheap, not what we would label cheap. And that brings us to this guy who's interesting. Randy Gregory, remember, he came into the NFL with all sorts of problems on the personal side. He slipped out of the first round, I think it was, and the Dallas Cowboys ended up taking him. He's had some issues in the NFL too. He's gotten suspended a couple of times, but he has really kind of leveled off and had a decent career. So he's a 5-year vet. So he's still on the young side. He's 6'5", 255 pounds. He's 29 years old. And he has a career total of 16.5 sacks in 5 years, 19 tackles for a loss, and 8 forced fumbles. Now, in 2021, he had 6 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 4 tackles for a loss. So even though he's not a premier guy, he's consistent and he's a good player. He played 11 games last year in 2021, and he's probably going to get anywhere from $9 to $12 million or something like that. So if you can get him on the 9 end, closer to that, maybe you want to consider Randy Gregory. I don't know if I just don't see Joe Douglas ponying up 12 or 13 million for this guy, but he could be an option. And don't forget, we stole Bradley and I from the Dallas Cowboys practice squad this year. So maybe bringing his line mate, Randy Gregory, and Bradley and I, maybe bringing those two together could be a nice 1-2 puncher, have some fluidity, some chemistry. I don't know. But Randy Gregory's up there too. Now let's take a look at number 5, the last guy. Let's take a look at Emmanuel Ogbah. Now I happen to like this player. I liked him coming out too. 6'4", 275 pounds. He's 28 years old, so he's the youngest of the bunch. He's been in the league for 6 years. In his career, he's had 36 sacks, 7 forced fumbles, and 37 tackles for a loss. In 2021, he had 9 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 6 tackles for a loss. And that was done in 10 games. He played 10 games last year, so he was injured. He was only available for 10 games. Now, they're saying that he could command anywhere from $13 to $15 million a year, which I don't know. I like the player. I think he's actually having somewhat of a resurgence in this second half of his career, we'll call it. And he could be somebody that is a legitimate option for the Jets if they want to try to take care of edge rushers so they don't have to use a first-round pick on it, and maybe you get a Boye Mafe or something like that in the 3rd round, somebody in that group. So that could be an option. You go get Emmanuel Ogbah, you get Boye Mafe, you pair those guys with Bradley and I and Bryce Huff and obviously Carl Lawson, and you put them with Quinnen Williams and JFN. Maybe you got something. This could be a way to look at it. And let's do a bonus guy. Let's just do a bonus guy. That was the top 5 guys out there. Let's talk about this guy because he's interesting. And he's probably going to be the least expensive out of the bunch. And this guy's 32 years old, 6'2", 265 pounds. You know who I'm talking about yet? Did you guess? Melvin Ingram. That's right. Melvin Ingram, who I always confuse with Melvin Gordon. I end up saying those guys backwards. Whenever I'm talking about Melvin Ingram, I say Melvin Gordon and vice versa. This time I have it written right in front of me, so I didn't make that mistake, and here we are. So in his career, he's had 51 sacks, 74 tackles for a loss, and 15 forced fumbles. In 2021, he had 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 2 tackles for a loss. So not quite the impact that you want to see when you're looking for a guy to fill your edge rusher need, but he could be a guy that you want to bring in for the rotation. That's why he's not in that top 5 group that I wanted to put forth that could maybe fix that hole for us. Maybe in that Dante Fowler mix, somebody that you bring in, he's just going to be rotational. You know he's going to go balls to the wall 100% to every play that he's on the field. You know that, and he's had a nice impact in his career. He's probably going to cost anywhere from $6 to $8 million to sign Melvin Ingram. I almost said Melvin Gordon. $6 to $8 million. For that price, maybe you want to bring him on board. And just so we know, he did play 6 games for the Steelers last year and then got traded to the Kansas City Chiefs for the final 9 games of the year and actually did well. Lots of quarterback hits, quarterback hurries, and that sort of stuff. He had 6 quarterback hits last year. So it's not always the sacks, right? But Melvin Ingram, I think, is a quality player that you can bring on board. But what do you think? Would this be a way that you want to go? You want to forego looking at edge rusher in the draft because most likely the 2 guys that you want aren't going to be there, and you don't want to waste a pick that high on a guy like a Karlaftis or an Ajabo or somebody. What do you think? You think this is an idea that you would buy into? Do you think the Jets would buy into this idea? I still don't know how I feel about it, but it's something I'm tossing around. Let me know what you think in the comments. And guys, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel a great deal. Very, very simple. Click that thumbs up, click that rectangular red subscribe button, and it's over. You never got to think about it again. But I thank you for watching, and as always, go Jets.